Hello and welcome back to my Android development tutorial series. This is tutorial number 10. This tutorial covers how to pull data from a database and display it. Let's go ahead and fire up the tutorial. And you can see, there it goes. It's pulling this list of ingredients for cocktails from a database. And I can scroll through it. It's just a simple list activity, pulling the data from a database that we've already preloaded. I showed you how to preload a database into an application in a previous episode. I believe that was number 9. And that's pretty much it. Now let's go examine the project. As you can see, the project has 2 Java files, our assets.db, and in the layout, we got 2 layouts. So this tutorial includes a lot of the stuff we've covered in previous ones. We covered how to use a adapter to pull data and populate a row. We covered our holder example, how we use the technique of a view holder to populate views more efficiently. And we also covered how to actually preload a database into an application. So let's go through the body of this thing. We've got 3 variables. We've got our helper, our cursor, and our adapter. We start up our view, we start our database helper, we initialize it, we create the database, we open the database, and then we run get cursor. We get our cursor, we start managing it, and we pass the cursor to our ingredient adapter, and then we set the adapter on our list view. We've also, just for testing sake, we've included this inside a try block just in case we get some errors. We can catch the exception and then toss it out to the log file. This is not really necessary, but it's kind of nice to have. You'll occasionally, especially working with databases and XMLs, a lot of those errors do not by default get thrown to the log file, so it might be a little bit difficult to diagnose those. Here is the cursor adapter. You can see it's got a bind view and a new view. This cursor adapter, instead of using get view and if row null, we use bind view and new view because cursor adapters have a default implementation of get view that calls bind view and new view as needed. This makes our code a little bit cleaner, and it's a better way to do this. And you can see this is where we are using our holder. Still pretty much the same, we're just doing it a little bit differently. New view is only called if the view actually is new. So the default implementation of get view is smart enough to know which of these it needs to call, so you don't have to do anything else with it. And now let's go examine our ingredient helper. And you can see, as before, we've got some strings up here. They're pretty much what you'd expect. We've got our constructors. We've got our create, our test to see if the database is there. If not, we preload it. And now down here, we actually have our get cursor. This is actually how we call from the database. We run a query on it. So we initialize a new query builder object. We set the table with the table name string that we declared up at the top. We tell it the columns to return. There's just 2 columns, the ID and the column title. Here we actually build the query. The most important thing to remember is if you're going to pass it a sort by, make sure you get this right, otherwise it won't return the cursor you need. And then we have 1 string, that's string get name, and we pass it a cursor object, and we run return get string on that cursor object. We want it to return string number 1, and that's in order. We have 1, 2, or 0, 1, excuse me. This is column number 1. That's our, up here you can see, that's our ingredient name. So that's just an alias to it. And that's it. So then that comes back to here. You can see, where are we looking at here? Here we have got our cursor that contains the results of our database query. We then pass that cursor to our adapter, which is down here. The adapter takes the cursors in from here. It runs it through the populate from in both instances. And the populate from pulls the get name as needed and sets the text. That's it. That's the most basic example of how to pull data from a database and display it in a list. And that's the end of this video.